Welcome to Greenhouse Grower to Grower, the podcast where we talk to growers from across the greenhouse industry about market trends, innovation, their biggest challenges and opportunities, and more. I'm Brian Sparks, editor of Greenhouse Grower. In early September, the Garden Media Group released its 2026 Garden Trends Report. This downloadable report is not just a closer look at what is up and coming in gardening, landscape design, and green living. It's also the 25th anniversary of the Garden Media Group's teams forecasting what's next in the garden world. In this episode, I'm joined by Marissa Reyes, Greenhouse Grower's new content specialist. We chat with Garden Media Group President Katie Dubow about some of the themes in this year's report, how everyone in the horticulture industry can turn these trends into action, and some of the hits and misses from past trends reports. Here's our conversation. So, Katie, it's good to have you back on the podcast. It's funny, I was talking last week with the person I spoke to last week, and it was his second time on the podcast. And I said, you're one of the few people who is a returning guest. Katie, you get to be the second in a row here, so this is great.
Well, you know, I always love talking with you, Brian. And of course, you know, when we bring the trends, it's something that we love to share. So I appreciate you having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this case, like we were talking about before we led into this, it's not just me. Marissa Reyes, who's part of the Greenhouse Grower team, is joining us on the call today as well. So looking forward to a great conversation here.
Yeah, happy to be here.
I want to start before we dig into this year's report and some of the calls to action that can come from that. The report just came out earlier this month from Garden Media Group. So can you talk about kind of the how and why you put together a report like this each year?
Yes. Well, this is our 25th annual report. So we've certainly gotten better at it over the years. I can remember my mom, Susie McCoy, who started Garden Media Group. I can remember many late nights. I'd be up working on a, history paper, and she'd be up doing the trends late into the night. And not to say that we don't still work late into the night, but we have really honed over these 25 years. I think we've really honed how to spot the trends. So The origin story goes like this. It was 26 years ago, Philadelphia Flower Show approached my mom. Oops, I wasn't going to say the name of the big flower show, but I did. They approached my mom and said, "We want your help promoting next year's show." And she said, what are you thinking of for the theme? What are the trends that you're seeing in the industry? And they kind of just stared at her. And she was like, "You're the biggest flower show in the United States, the oldest flower show in the United States. You don't know what the trends are?" And so I think the lore is the next year's show's theme was Paris. And so that year, of course, because trend setting and spotting are like a handshake, they really go together. Whereas you are looking at things that are coming up, but there is a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you start talking about these things, then they become reality. And so the Mayon Rose also happened to launch that year. And a lot of things that were ooh la la, very French, came to fruition in that first year. And so France became the big first trend of ours. And the report has evolved over the years too, where we did kind of a what's in and what's out was the first couple of years. And then it evolved to be what it is today. But the process is long. It takes a long time. As both of you know, in researching a story, it starts with a spark. And then you've got to make sure that that idea hasn't been done before. And then you've got to make sure that that idea has some research to back it up. And then you've got to talk to people to say, am I crazy? Am I crazy to think that this might be a trend? And if everybody says that you're not crazy, then maybe you're wrong, because someone's got to think you're crazy, right? There's got to be someone who's not in on the idea. Otherwise, maybe it's too much like in the now. So we do a lot of interviews, a lot of chatting with folks. And to be honest, there is a little bit of gut in there too. There's a little bit of how will this fly? How will this land? I've done enough presentations now that I can visualize myself actually on the stage at Cultivate, presenting these and looking at the audience and saying, are they nodding their heads? Or are they kind of giving me a quizzical look, or are they falling asleep? I've got to really how will the audience respond to this as well?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I was talking to Marissa coming into this, and I was saying because this was her first time going to Cultivate. This is also obviously her first time seeing this presentation. I think I said at one point, if there's one talk you have to go to a Cultivate, this is going to be the one because
Oh,
Yeah.
it's so forward looking, and I like to how you kind of use that sort of as a soft launch for
yes.
the report where you share some of the most of the initial ideas, get some audience feedback, get some interaction. How many changes do you typically make between that Cultivate presentation and the final version?
It varies year to year. This year, the design changed completely. I was
Okay.
not happy. And in fact, we were working on the design up until like the day before it launched. Sometimes full trends will fall out. And well, because I like to at least have seven, then we're scrambling like, okay, what's in the moment right now? What's happening right now to add another trend back in? So it really, sometimes I'll get great examples because oftentimes we're sharing a trend that we have examples in the fashion industry or in the home industry or technology, but we haven't yet found one in the garden industry. And after I give that talk, I'll have a few people approach me as garden centers or growers and say, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And it gives me a concrete example within our industry to be able to add to the report. So it does vary, but it is fabulous to be able to stand there and say, tell me what you think, give me your feedback, because I'm only as good as the people who are actually out there growing the plants and
Right.
doing the things. One note that I got, a great question this year was, and this is particularly relevant to growers, it
Right.
was, okay, 2026 trends are fabulous. However, we as growers are planning way further in advance than
Hmm.
2026. We're wrapped and done. So
Yeah.
how would you suggest we use the trends for an audience like that? And to that I say, these trends are not Labubus, or if you're of an older group, trolls. These are not
Yeah.
fly by night collectibles that are going to be in one day, out the other. When we think about our trends and when we put them together, they are trends that we see kind of affecting our industry for the long haul, 3 to 5 years, or sometimes becoming lifestyle shifts.
Yeah.
So it is worthwhile for growers in particular to take a look and say,
Yeah.
okay, this is something that maybe is starting to happen right now, but will be worth our investment in the long run because this is a lifestyle shift. And as we talk about the trends for this year, I'll make note of which ones I think folks should pay attention to that I think are lifestyle shifts.
Okay, that's a great point. It's something I don't think we've really talked about much is,
No,
yeah, and this is not a 1 year and done thing. I
right.
mean,
No.
like any trend, I mean, if you're talking about it, your intention is for it to last,
Yes,
quite a few years. And you made the point about growers. I would think, Stephen, taking a step back from that, the plant breeders as well, they're looking even
exactly.
further into the future with what they're
Yep.
doing.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. And these are things that I think maybe not the color of the year. That has a little bit more
Sure.
or less staying power, but the rest of them I think you can really count on for being shifts.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to dig into this year's report then, and we kind of walk through some of the highlights from from what you saw this past year. I might jump in a little bit with some of my favorites because there were a couple in there I spotted right away and said
Yay.
these fall right into my lap, and I'm sure Marissa, you kind of had the same thoughts as you were going through it. But what stands out to you from this year's report?
Well, it's funny. Yesterday, I was at Star Roses and Plants giving them the trends, and now you are the second, public conversation I've had about them since they've launched.
Okay.
So, like you said, they launched the beginning of this month. I gave about 10 talks before they launched, but it's one thing to have a crowd that you're presenting to. It's another to put that baby out into the world and see how everybody responds to it. So, one of the interesting things is that the overarching theme has been one that most people have responded to. And that's different than years past. In years past, people will pick out trends and
Mm,
say, this is the one. For example, living hedges last year was
Mhm.
a media darling. We had over 50 consumer media articles written about various living hedges, living
yeah.
fences. So fences for pets, for pollinators, for shade, whatever it was. Um, and so you don't really know until you put it out in the world what people are going to respond to. And the overarching theme this year is one that people are really picking up. And I think it's because it's the one that people are spotting the most out there in the world, and it's lemonading. That overarching theme this
Right.
year is called lemonading, and that concept is one I think we inherently know, so it's easy to adapt to because we all have heard the phrase, when life gives you lemons, what do you
Yeah.
do? And at Cultivate, the audience was like, make lemonade. I haven't had an engaged audience since then. I keep trying to pull it out of people, but um so it's the idea of like finding sweetness in unexpected challenges. And
Sure.
I think we can all agree, no matter where you are in the world, there are some challenges. We've got tariff situations, we have economic uncertainty, we have climate uncertainty. So there's a lot of things that we can be wary of. But as consumers, and then I hope that trickles over to the business world, our
Yeah.
consumers, our customers are feeling very optimistic. In fact, I know, this is Greenhouse Grower podcast. So when I talk to garden centers, so greenhouse grower customers, they're
Mm.
very optimistic about the future.
Yeah.
And a recent conference I attended, sales were slightly up, and they are predicting even greater sales for next year. So when we're looking
Good.
at, maybe we're not 20% up like we were back in 2021, but people are able to look at the positive side of things. The concept of lemonading, though, is not just about like false optimism or
Right.
just looking at something and saying it's gonna be fine, but it's acknowledging that there are some challenges and then moving beyond them. And so one of the calls to action in that overarching theme is that maybe it's time to start, as an industry, to start looking at our failures with a little bit more transparency. And so
Mm.
sharing with our customers, the end user gardener, yeah, Japanese beetles might eat your hibiscus, your roses, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Yes, there are
hmm
tree pests out there. So, but here's how you rebuild. Here's how, if you have been devastated by a flood, your garden, and you're afraid to invest again, we can show you that this has happened, but we've rebuilt better with better plants that are more tolerant to wet feed and blah, 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 blah. So I think it's lemonading is being optimistic, but also realistic. And so that's been
hmm
resonating with people more than I thought and more than themes have in the past, which is really fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we talk all the time about that first time plant parent fear
Yes.
that, if I'm going to kill something, what do I do? And, I mean, are you going to lose that customer because they had one bad experience? And to your point, it's all about instilling that confidence and pointing out those failures too. We all fail. The process involves failing, learning from what you did wrong or what happened. Maybe there wasn't anything that you did wrong, so things just happen, and
Right.
then moving forward from that.
Yes. Did you see
Yep.
CBS Sunday Morning from this week?
Oh, it's on I saw some highlights about it. I haven't seen the
Yeah.
full report yet, but
So it was about plant funerals,
mm,
and Dr. Melinda Knuth was interviewed in the piece, which was really fun to see an industry person actually interviewed in a national program like that. But it was talking about the death of a plant, and the guy, it was an artist, he wasn't even a plant person, who hosted a plant funeral, and people brought their plants there, and
yeah,
they were like, I'm so sorry, little plant. I'll do better next time, but it was
That's amazing.
it was a joyful experience, and I was just, this is lemonading at its core.
sure. Well, let's talk in detail about some of the actual trends then, and
Yeah, let's do it.
what were some of your favorites? What stood out this year? This year,
So what I suspect maybe one of your favorites is already starting to be a media darling, and that's Barkitecture.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that might be one of your favorites again. And this is the one, to me, I suspect will be the media darling, but also is not just going to be a lifestyle shift. It is already, people and pets have gone, or gardeners and pets in particular, have always gone together. But the
yeah,
reason we chose this year for Barkitecture to be in the report is because we're seeing a rise of chatter within some of our competitors talking about how pets and gardens go together. And the first example is Monty Don, who is a
okay,
famed British garden royalty, really. I think he's been
Yeah.
knighted, but he had his first ever garden at the Royal Horticultural Society's Chelsea flower show. So
Mhm.
that was a big deal for Monty. And he
Mhm.
also had a pet garden, and it was the first pet garden that they ever created. I say explain who Monty Don is because when I was telling my husband about the trends, I was, and the reason we picked architectures, 2 words, Monty Don. And he looked at me like with this blank stare and he's like, I don't
Who is that?
I don't know who that is. I'm like, oh man. So anyway, the other reason besides Monty's gorgeous, you should just look up some pictures of the garden. It was absolutely stunning. So a feast for both, people and pets.
Yeah.
But the other reason is that we saw that Lowe's launched a program called Petio, Petio, and it's an AI garden design feature that you can go to their website and you can find all the plants and soils and garden beds and fencing and trees and things that you need easily from their website. And to us, it just occurred to us that if Lowe's, a big box store who's got lots of money to lean into where the trends are going, is investing in this, then we need to make sure that as an industry, we're responding. And one of the
Yeah.
things that I tell growers is like, what about paw prints on plant tags? If the second biggest reason that millennials are choosing their homes is their pets. Third is their children. They are choosing things to purchase, like a home, for their pets over their children. This is so important to them. So important to them. Why don't we help them along the process, figuring out what plants can work with their pets? When I did present this particular trend to a big grower, a woman in the audience afterwards raised her hand and said, I've worked here for 12 years and I don't have a single plant because I'm afraid they're going to kill my pets. So,
Wow.
Mhm.
I mean, talk about a lack of education. They
Yeah.
Yeah.
have the plants that can serve her. And she's an employee. How do our customers feel? Are they afraid to start to grow something because they just don't know where to begin? So I
Mm.
think there's a lot of education to go around that can start at the grower that helps pet parents identify safe plants and of course keeping it fun. The
Yeah.
ASPCA has a list on their website of plants that they say are safe, which I know can be a little bit tricky. You don't want
Mhm.
to start suggesting things that are safe for pets and then there's a legal
Right.
issue. So the ASPCA would be a great partner.
Well, and I would imagine too, I mean, it extends not just to, homeowners who are deciding where they're going to live, but also if you're a designer of like an outdoor living space, or even if you own a bar that has an outdoor patio, you see
Yeah.
more and more. I mean, I'm outside of Cleveland. More and more of the bars downtown here are, making their outdoor patios pet accessible.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
building up these outdoor patios to, be welcoming for both the owner and the pet.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Exactly. So I think that has big implications for us as we position our plants for people to have more of them in their homes. I mean, 70% of gardeners are pet parents, but I don't know what the percentage of pet parents is that don't garden. I think we
Right.
have a huge group of people that we could still cultivate to bring into the field.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm curious, Marissa, what was one of your favorites?
Well, I mean, I love the purpose-driven trend, and I think that's huge, and it's going to be around for a really long time. You're seeing
Yeah.
a lot of people who want, something with a purpose of they're buying plants specifically for what they can do for a space, whether that's edibles, or just pollinator-friendly plants, stuff like that, that's going to bring something to the ecosystem. And I think that's
Yeah.
really important right now is that we want to feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves and not, so much like it's a small garden, I'm doing what I can, but realizing that it's actually, bringing more purpose to your life and also your
Yeah.
space. So that's a huge thing right now, and I'm all for it.
You hit the nail on the head with that trend because a lot of people look at the purpose driven and they think it's just about giving back to charity. And it's like, well, actually, half of the trend is about how to align, create that halo effect with your brand aligning with a cause. But the other half of that trend is just saying people want to feel good about what they're buying and they want to align their values with the brands that they choose to shop with. And that doesn't have to be a cause. That could just be positioning our products for what they are, which is good for the environment.
Right.
So
Native, fire-wise, stuff like that. People having problems, like how can this plant solve the problem, right?
exactly.
Which kind of ties into lemonading, right? Like life gives you lemons, you make lemonade.
Yes.
So if you're having problems, especially to the example you brought up, like all of a sudden you have flooding in your yard, well, build a swale or a rain
Yeah.
garden, there's lots of stuff that goes with that, and all those things are trending.
Yeah, and one of the data points that helped us prove this is that the National Wildlife Federation is seeing an increase
Yeah.
almost more than 2020, which we can all remember the pandemic was great for gardening. 2025 is almost surpassing 2020 in the number of people who are certifying their backyard habitats. So
Yeah.
when we heard that data, we thought, okay, so people aren't just planting for pollinators, but they want to tell the world, passerbys, friends, family, that this is something that is important to them so much that they're humble bragging about it.
I tell you, when I was going through the report this morning, actually, for second, third, fourth time, whatever it was at this point, because I keep looking back at it for what stands out to me this time. The personal treasures, I think, was something that really jumped out at
Yeah,
me because,
that's a
as
great one.
I'm one of those collectors, I mean, in fact, when I was flipping through the slides, I saw the cassette tapes and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a flashback to me from 20, 30 years ago. Actually, probably 20, 30 days ago, because I still have a drawer of those same
Oh
cassettes
my,
sitting around that I really don't get a chance to do much with anymore. But that point about there's interest in collecting in so many different ways. So how plants can be a
Yeah.
big part of that, and being and I like the other point too about how you then share with the world what you're collecting, and it doesn't
yeah.
it's going on social media and sharing, here's what I did, here's what you can do as well. So
Yeah.
that one really jumped out at me.
Yeah, and I love that one also is to me very lifestyle driven. Like this is
Yeah.
something that has always been a trend. People have been collecting forever, right? So now what is the difference and what made it into the report this year is that people are it's not about instant gratification anymore. It's about collecting to form your identity, and especially young people, not, no offense Brian, not you and me, but young people are wanting to be different than
Yeah.
not just the generations before them, but from their peers. They're going over to friends' houses and seeing the same things that they got from the same big box stores, as it applies to furniture and china and all of these things. So it really is a chance for people to share something about their identity and who they are. And when we really dug into an eBay report, an Etsy trend report, and Pinterest, all three of those really echoed this vintage, nostalgic, collectible period that we are entering in. They all
Mm,
predict is going to be one of the biggest that we've had. And in fact, it was Etsy who said that plants, horticulture, was one of the biggest areas that they're seeing a growth in. And so what we did in this trend is we broke down a type of collector. So we
mhm.
help growers and retailers and designers identify these collectors and say, okay, well, is this person interested in just one particular variety? Like Costa helped us understand that Monsteras, while we thought they peaked over the pandemic, they released a Burl Marks Flame earlier this year that sold
Yeah.
out in one day on their website.
Oh my
So
gosh.
Monstera are still hot because we've got this collector, this person who wants every single variety they can get their hands on. We also have the type of person who wants just the new, the fresh. What's just breaking out, and I don't care if it's a Monstera, a Pothos, Aster, goldenrod, whatever it is, they'll want the newest plant. And then the third one that we identified that my colleague brought to my attention was a nativist. Back to
Mm,
the purpose-driven planting is the people who are so passionate about native plants that they really do want to not just collect every native plant for their region, but the native moth species or butterfly species or native bees that are the hosts for those caterpillars. And so
yeah.
they're really passionate and educating themselves around that. So this whole thing creates really um, this personal museum of your life.
You almost wonder if that too could lead to a better understanding just in general of native, because there tends to be so much confusion now. But what plants are truly native? What does native really mean? What's native versus native are? So this
Yeah,
could play along into helping define some of that, I think.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. And one other one, I don't want to scoop the whole report. Let's give one other one. That's the real out of the box trend. Every year there is something that we like to make people say, huh? And this year that trend is called level up and it's
Mhm.
about gaming. And so I don't know if either of you
Okay.
are gamers.
No.
To some extent, but
Yeah.
gaming as in like the old Nintendo versions is probably the
Right.
extent that I go.
So you haven't tried any of the cozy games.
I have not, unfortunately, no.
So I think you would love them, Brian. I did not when this was first brought to my attention. I was also not a gamer, and it was kind of one of those things like, okay, this is 13-year-old boys, right? We're talking about these are not people who would be our customers. But no, I was wrong. Cozy gamers, their average age is between 13 and 39, and half of them are women. So wouldn't you love, as any business, to look at your Google Analytics and see that you've got that sweet spot of 13 to 39 and half of your demographic are women? I mean, that would be the perfect ideal customer for a garden center or any garden brand, really. And so the cozy garden genre is literally designed to make people less anxious. And that's why I think the mentions of cozy gardening grew by 57% this year on Google Trends. And what you do in one of these games, if you've never played, and some of the games are called like Stardew Valley or Harvest Moon, Minecraft, Zelda, you walk around. You just walk around like that, garden. We can all picture in our minds, maybe even your own greenhouse you're thinking about. You pick flowers, you plant
Yeah.
seeds, you tend to animals. It is interacting with nature online, but what it's telling us is that these people want to interact with nature. They just maybe don't have a touch point on how to get there, but they're telling us they want to do it. Half of the world are gamers. Half of the world. I think the number was like 4 billion people are gamers. And so it is incredible to think that there's this group of people that are telling us they want plants, and maybe they just don't know how to get them. And maybe they're not going to be full acre gardeners yet, but I believe that this is kind of the new gateway drug. Like herbs, we used to say are the gateway drug to gardening. I think that these games really are that gateway. And I think we're going to see more and more growers partnering with the games, because as it stands now, the plants in the games are made up names, but they're real plants. They're inspired by real plants. So the next step here would be awesome if we could actually get some branded real plants in there. So when, for example, a man came up to me after one of the talks and he said, I have owned a garden center for 25 years. I have not been able to get my kids interested in plants at all until Roblox launched their Grow a Garden game. And now my son's coming to me with his phone. Dad, can we grow this? Dad, every day. He's coming to me. Can we grow this? Can we grow this? So I think there's going to be a tie-in. And yeah, if it's the kids, we all know they bring their parents in to the industry, right? It's a great way to get parents interested, is get the kids interested. So either way, whether it is the 30-year-old female or the 13-year-old boy, this cozy gaming trend is, I think, just at the beginning, and we're only going to see it grow.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, and I should point out for anybody who's listening to this, you can find this entire report in a couple of different ways. You can go to Garden Media Group's website. You can download the full report there. You can also go to Greenhouse Grower, and there's a link there that'll take you right to where you can download the report as well. So, and dig through it. Get inspired. Get some ideas in there. I mean, there's a lot of great little things that you could miss if you go through it too quickly that can stand out to anybody. One of the things that I also want to talk about, and you and I talked about this, Katie, a lot in the past, is, you have these trends come out, and, if you're somebody who's part of the floriculture industry, who has a direct consumer connection, it's I shouldn't say easy, but it's simpler to translate those trends into how you work with consumers. If you're somebody who's part of the industry but doesn't have that direct consumer connection, you may struggle, I think, with, okay, how does this apply to me? What can I do in response to these trends? And I know, in fact, what was really interesting to me this year, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think this was the first year at Cultivate where you didn't just have your presentation going over the trends. The next part of it was translating those trends into action, which I know, Marissa, you attended that as well. So that really stood out to me. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about some of the tips you might have. And Marissa, if you have any questions on that, feel free as well.
Of course.
On how to take some of those trends. Again, if you're not somebody who's directly involved with the plant consumer today, how you can take advantage of this.
Yeah, thanks for coming to that, Marissa. It felt like the whole room got up and left after the trends talk, and I was like, no, day. So we're building, because the trends, obviously Rome wasn't built in a day. So the Trends Talk has a lot of big reputation. So people come to that. And I do hope that the retailers that stay, because that particular session was aimed at retailers. But as far as growers, I think there are a few trends. As we do this, it's always with the eye of the consumer. In the end, the trends have the eye of the consumer in mind, but obviously the grower is growing for the end user consumer. So it's just a couple years down the road. But
Right.
I think that one of the challenges I have heard is, I love watching your trends. I get so inspired, and then I get home and I don't know what to do. So it was actually Cultivate who came up with the idea. I got to give them full credit. I did not come up with the idea to do this trends to action, but it
Okay.
really, the feedback was that it was very helpful.
Good.
So one of the ones I think that we didn't talk about today is called precision gardening. And
Mhm.
I think specifically for growers who can use these data-driven solutions. And, we talked about, in the precision gardening trend, it's about hyper local advice, hyper specific advice to a person. And it really is inspired by the precision healthcare trend. So just to take it back up, I was going to jump right into what growers can do, but a little background on what the trend is.
Sure.
It's precision healthcare actually is the Aura ring. If you guys have heard of that Aura ring, it's the ring that you wear that gives you access to your sleep, like to the second. When you rolled over, if someone next to you made a noise, if you had to get up and go to the bathroom, and they're all the rage. There's a number of other examples of things that give people today precise information about their own body to the
Mhm.
second. And so when we look at the healthcare industry, and there's data in the report about how people expect this personalization from other brands, I think the statistic was 85% are now coming to expect personalization from all the brands they engage with. So
Okay.
as a garden industry, this isn't happening yet, but it's coming. It's really coming down the pipeline. We are seeing extension webinars from company, or from like University of Maine and Oregon State. We're seeing their webinars on fire resilient plants, drought resilient plants, flood resilient plants sell out. I
Yeah.
mean, who would have thunk that an extension webinar would sell out? So these are our customers, our consumers telling us, we want information on how to create gardens that are adapting to today's climate. So this is where, as an industry, we need to step in and start reframing what we offer, and maybe even adding to the tags, and making collections for flood resilient. And that collection goes in North Carolina,
Sure.
what people need is really easy access to what problems they're having in their yards. And I think as growers, we can help them by putting a QR code, like having a little bit more information than just what a tag has to provide, sharing with these customers some hyper local care tips. I also think the same thing can apply to a pet friendly collection. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mentioned in the architecture trend, like putting a little paw print on a tag. So it's giving the customer information about what they're interested in, and then passing that on. But it's not enough anymore to just say zone 6 through 9.
Yeah.
That's not what the customer wants to know. They don't even know what zone they live in,
Mhm.
so how is that helpful to them? We need to have more detailed information, and it's coming. I mean, I hear that there are growers working on this right now, where you can scan a QR code and it takes you to a chat bot that says,
Mm.
hi Marissa, we know that you're located in Ohio, and we would love to, specifically wherever you live. It would be a little more specific than that. We know that you're located XYZ, and where do you want to put this, in your front yard or your backyard? And you say, my backyard. Oh, I know, because of your past history, you have a pool. Are you thinking of putting this by the pool? And oh, you have a pet. This plant's not great for you because you have a pet, but might I suggest? And it gives you more suggestions. That's the future. That is what's coming. And that's the now. Truly, that is what's happening now. We have the ability to do that now. And there are some growers that are thinking of putting that kind of chat bot attached to their plants, so that you can get that very personalized information and have the confidence that you're actually choosing the right plant for you.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because I mean, you talk to Dr. Alan Armitage, and he talks about solution gardening a lot. This
Yes.
sounds like it's almost taking that to the extreme, and his focus is mostly on deer resistance and pollinator friendly plants. But I mean, talk about a solution where you can immediately tell your consumer, here's exactly where you should be putting the plant. Here's what you
Right.
should be choosing. I mean,
Right. Because if I live in an urban area, well, I mean, deer are everywhere these days, but if I
Yeah.
live in an urban area and I'm looking at a hibiscus, a decorative, a tropical hibiscus, and I read that it's deer resistant, what do I care? Maybe I've never seen a deer in my life. We have to really cater to the needs of our customers. And I love that solution based gardening. And sometimes our customer, it's not a one size fits all
yeah,
solution. So one
Mhm.
plant, as we all know, can have multiple solutions for
Yep.
different people. And so it's when that person comes to you. And there's even an app now where you can show your backyard and that plant will pop up there in your backyard. And so you can actually visualize what it looks like there, which I think is really helpful because I do believe that gardening, as the more we lean into AI, some people might be rolling their eyes thinking, I'm sick of hearing about AI. Well, get used to it. First of all,
Yeah.
it's not going anywhere. But I do think that the more people use AI in their daily lives, the more consciously or subconsciously they're going to be craving nature. And so
yeah.
it's going to be a balance of the two. Even my 80-year-old dad uses ChatGPT. He asked it the other day. Are you ready? Does a skunk smell if it has never sprayed? These are the questions that my 80-year-old
What was
father
the answer?
is asking ChatGPT. He actually told me he was going to ask it. I haven't followed up yet to hear the answer.
Oh,
I'm
I need to
curious.
know.
I am curious. Do your own Googling or chatting. So it is, I think, now stretching to all generations, but I do believe that it's only going to make our customers more dangerous, right? They're going to be able to make better choices, and dangerous in a good way, like make their own choices to say, is this plant the right thing for what I want it for? Yes, I'm going to buy 4 of them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I won't buy it. And then I won't have a poor experience with it.
Yes, exactly that too, because then you're, decreasing the failure, right? If they have all these tools where they can go in and, an AI or whatever app you're using is saying, hey, this plant's not going to work for you, but this one,
Yeah,
which is very similar and has the same concept, is going to be great, then people aren't failing and they're not getting discouraged from coming
exactly.
back to the garden center. And I just think that's a great idea.
What I like too about some of this is, it really highlights how all sectors of the industry can be a part of this. I think, we saw some of this
Yeah.
play out when I was at California Spring Trials earlier this year, what some of the breeders were doing to, early in response to to some of these trends, and how this can help bridge some of those gaps between here's what the breeders are doing, here's what the growers are
Yep.
doing, all the way through to what the retailer and the end consumer can do as well.
Yep. Yes, definitely. Honestly, it starts with the breeder sometimes.
Yeah.
If the garden center is buying from a grower who is getting plants from a breeder and they don't have anything that is pet friendly, how can a garden center offer that?
Yeah.
They're not going to have anything to purchase or add to their collection from a list of pet friendly plants. So we're only as good as the plants that we are getting down the pipeline.
Sure, sure. One of the things that I want to talk about here too, and we talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the conversation. So this is the 25th year of this report, which is great. And as we've talked about in the past, it's fun to take a look back sometimes at, you know, which of these trends have you been spot on with, and which of these trends were amiss. And I mean, that happens with
Yeah.
everybody. So
Yeah.
if you want to take a look back and maybe think of a couple that really stand out to you, is yeah, we nailed this one and it's still strong today, versus I don't know, we were kind of off the ball on this one a little bit.
Yeah. Well, you really helped me, Brian, many years ago, take a hard look at the successes and failures. And it's always important. That's what lemonading's all about, right? Saying, hey, it's okay to fail. And we learn from it and we move on. We move forward. So we'll start with the successes. We'll Oreo cookie this. We'll do some successes, some failures in the middle, and end with some successes. But because looking back is always fun no matter what. It's so helpful to take a look back Otherwise, how do we learn and improve? And I'd say in our report, we actually have a couple things that you highlighted when you did some research on this as well. But in 2003, one of our first reports, we saw the rise of container gardening. That was an era of McMansions, and everybody was going bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we thought they're going to have bigger and bigger and bigger gardens. But we actually spotted that this trend was more about decorating. And so containers were used like throw pillows, and that people really were starting to add them to their porches and patios as just decor and almost throwaway decor. And that's, I think, moved to an era where we are today, is that small space gardening and container gardening is really, if you have a outdoor garden, you have a container. Even if you don't garden in the ground, you have a container. So that was one I think we really predicted. In 2007, we highlighted native plants. And so American Beauties, the plant brand out of North Creek and Pride's Corner, was just starting to take off. And they're still continuing to innovate today. It's interesting to see what they're doing with compostable or, non-plastic containers out in the space. But we highlighted native plants. And today, I think they are central. They're a lifestyle, right? There's room to grow, as you said. There's some confusion, but they're a part of the main conversation. And then I think more recently, 2018, which feels like yesterday, but we talked about wellness, and we really talked about how we are using our gardens not just for beauty or for food, but we are using our gardens as sanctuaries. And that is something that now today seems like, God, everybody, of course, everyone's talking about that. But at the time, nobody was talking about gardens as wellness. And it's something I'm really proud of. Of course, a lot of these were before my time. I've been at Garden Media Group, since I was 6. I was my mom's first employee, but in my adult years for 15 years. And so, of course, I have to give credit to the team, and of whom Stacy Pearson is still on the staff today. She just celebrated 27 years at Garden Media Group.
Oh, nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, very amazing. It's amazing she started there when she was 4, but but the team at Garden Media Group, it is obviously not me that does this. It is the whole group of people, and a lot of these they were doing before I even got here.
Sure.
Including these ones that were misses. So a couple that I'd say I am still surprised, vertical gardening. I think that was one we really saw, especially we look at small spaces. We look at the way we're still, I still look at the statistics about how our suburban area is now urban. Rural areas are now suburban. It's like we're just pushing and pushing and pushing out and out further into the country, which means we're losing more space to grow. But man, we are not utilizing that vertical space as much as we predicted people would.
Yeah.
So that's certainly one. Another one that we predicted a few years back is robots in the garden. So we had yep, robots doing your weeding. And
wow.
It is something that if a vacuum cleaner can do it, why can't a robot do your weeding for you? But it's certainly not. I mean, it's amazing because everything is on our phones, but we don't yet have that kind of virtual assistant that's literally doing the tasks.
Yeah. Well, and we can't follow your team for that too, because how many times do you see predictions about we're going to have robots to do this and do that? We're going to be, have self-flying cars. None of that comes to fruition. I mean,
Right. The hoverboards, I'm still waiting for literally the Back to the Future style hoverboards.
Yes.
But so those are two that it felt very right in the moment, but they have not really taken off as lifestyle movements.
Do you ever look back at some of the vertical gardening trend, and maybe at the time it wasn't the best fit, but do you ever look ahead 10 or 15 years into the future? Is it worth revisiting some of these and say, okay, maybe now this is the time for it? Or how do you guys approach something like that?
Definitely. I think that a lot of the things that we, especially because clients come to us a lot of times when they're startups and they're brand new and they say, we need your help. And we love working with startups, but sometimes those brands are just ahead of their time. And one of my mom's second client was called Tulip World, and they were out of Holland, and they had a website, which was amazing. This was 30 years ago, so that was amazing in itself. But you were able to purchase bulbs from their website, and you could sort them by deer resistant, by zone, by color. It was groundbreaking at the time, but people didn't understand how to use that. to their advantage. And so that company didn't take off because
Oh,
they
they'd be
were,
thriving now.
yeah, exactly. Like now you can't have a site where you shop that you can't sort
Yeah.
stuff. But back then it
Yeah.
was, I want red tulips. You go and you buy exactly what you want instead of solution-based gardening, like narrowing down from the assortment to what fits your needs. So they were before their time. So I do think that some of these trends were before their time. That was something that we spotted that is a need. Like, of
Mhm.
course, we're going to be using the sides of our homes or patios and growing upwards because we don't have any more space. So I think there will be some of those. I mean, yet to be seen, but
Yeah.
that will come to fruition.
Okay. Yeah, I've got kind of a twofold question here for you. So I guess it ends with, when does the process for next year's trends start? And related to that is, and I know you gave this initial presentation to Cultivate. As you're walking around the trade show floor throughout the rest of the event, were there things that inspired you that you started to think, okay, we didn't put this in this year's report, but we got to start thinking ahead for next year's?
Yesterday is the answer to your first question. When do, as soon as we wrap, honestly, on 2020, the whatever year we are in, it's like what you just said. I am already starting to think about what could have been in that report. And so a lot of those things, that we're discovering now will be come and gone by the time that we start really putting our heads together for the report. But we really do start working on it almost right away.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, that starts at Cultivate. But the great thing about the soft launch that we do in kind of our summer trade show season is that we're still able to fit some of the trends into some of those things that we spot into the trends. I mean, goth gardening is the best example. We didn't call it goth gardening, but last year that was our trend. And Lord, listen, that one is 2 trends ago. I can't even remember what that one was called, but it was about the rise of these dark foliage and flowered plants. And we're walking around the trade show and it was like, people, what is like, there were so many examples at Cultivate last year of these dark foliage plants. So it was almost this like gratifying process of saying, okay, we are right this year. We're spot
Yeah.
on about it. So Cultivate does those two things for us where we can spot new things, but it's also a bit of a process of saying, yes, we are fulfilled in understanding that what we are predicting and what's happening out in culture is being reflected by the growers. And that's a testament to what the breeders and growers are doing their own research as well.
Sure.
They're looking at our trends report, but they're also really, some of them are very much on the cutting edge and
Yeah.
having to predict 10 years down the line what they're going to start working on. Knockout Rose celebrated 25 years this year. And I spoke to Bill Radler a lot. He goes by Will now. Will Radler a lot during this last year. And it took over 25 years for Knockout to be from, when he started planting his first rose in his backyard to when it was launched. So,
Yeah.
I think we can't underestimate the time that these things take. And I know that that's impossible to follow the trends in that case.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and it's funny you mentioned the goth gardening, and I'll just say, as somebody who grew up listening to bands like The Cure and Nine Inch Nails, I
Yes.
saw that a couple of years ago. I was like, oh, I am all over this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
I'm
one thing I do. I look, and Marissa, you definitely feel like you're in the same wavelength as I, where
Yep.
100%.
these are the things that jump out to me. So,
Yep.
and I know even Marissa, when I talk to you about your own garden at home, it seems like a lot of these are also going to apply to what you're doing as well at home.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I have a small space backyard in the middle of Milwaukee. I'm right in the middle of the city. It's concrete. I have raised beds back there that I'm growing in, and I love goth gardening. So
Yes.
all the dark plants, and I'm all for it. And I always say, if something's not eating your garden, you're not part of the ecosystem.
I love that.
Yeah, that's my thing. And it's funny you mentioned Will Radler. Actually, I worked for him previously for a while. He lives like 15 minutes from my house and
Wow.
right next to my high school.
Oh my
And
God.
I had no clue that he existed, but this was prior to me getting into horticulture. So when I did, I was like, what, this is crazy. And how he found the double knockout actually was just him at Home Depot looking at the knockout in general. And he's like, what's going on with this? Took it home, realized it was the double knockout. I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Isn't that amazing? It's amazing. That's cool.
I love being able to do this trend spotting before you even see it. It's kind of one of those things that's in the back of your mind, and then a couple of years later, you're like, "Oh, I saw this. This is something that's going to be a part of what we're going to see in the industry." So,
Yeah, for sure.
Katie, I don't want to leave the conversation with that. I know you mentioned it earlier in the conversation. Your mom, Susie, how's she doing? I know I missed seeing her
Oh,
at some of the events.
yeah, she's doing great. She has still her love of gardening. And like you just said, Marissa, she put in this entire native plant garden in Florida, to which her friend said, "Where are all the leaves on your plants?" And she said, "The caterpillars are eating them. They're doing what they're
Yep.
supposed to be doing." So she's still gardening, but she's golfing, she's painting. So she is not letting any moss grow on her stones.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Amazing.
Katie, any final thoughts on this year's report and, any of your own personal favorites that we haven't talked about yet?
I think we covered a lot of the trends. I think that, just to reiterate that these really are something that we are looking to create lifestyle or help growers understand what's coming, not just tomorrow, not just next year, but 10 years down the road. And so for us, the trends report's about stepping back and taking a look at what consumers want and really giving the industry like a compass to guide
Sure.
you on to make ways you can make your decision, not a stopwatch. Like, oh, here's the trend now. So it's really is just a guide, and we really do see them as fun. Don't go painting your whole walls or your whole building the color of the year, which you'll have to download the report to find out what it is. But it really is about how growers, breeders, retailers, and brands can position themselves for the long run. So it's something that we love, and I thank you for helping us shine some light on it.
Oh, yeah. And I love catching up with you in conversations like this. And I'm glad that you and Marissa have formed a connection as well here,
Yes.
too. So
Yeah, me
lots
too.
to look forward to.
Me too.
Yep. Sad this has to end.
All right, Katie, we'll check in about a year at this time and see how the will be for the 2027 report that's going to come out next year. So
Yes,
looking forward to that.
I can't wait. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. You can learn more at greenhousegrower.com. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen, and please leave us a rating as it helps other podcast listeners find the show.